Again, thank you, everyone. I'm going to be letting people in as they come in. Again, I want to say thank you to everyone for being part of this discussion tonight. I think it's extremely important that we have the opportunity not only to talk to our elected officials, but also other people in the community who are trying to solve issues as they come up. My name is Anietie Ekanem, and I started OneBayview Speaks. I want to begin with our ancestral acknowledgement. We honor the gifts, resilience, and sacrifices of our Black ancestors, particularly those who toiled the land and built the institutions that established the city's wealth and freedom, despite never being compensated nor fully realizing their own sovereignty. We acknowledge this exploitation of not only our labor, but of our humanity, and through this process of working to repair some of the harms done by public and private actors. Because of this work, we are here and will invest in the descendants of their legacy. This is the Black ancestral acknowledgement that was created and done for the San Francisco African American Reparations Committee that I had the honor to serve on, primarily because of Supervisor Walton. And we did a lot of good work there, but I also think it's really important for us to acknowledge the work that Black people have done for the city and county of San Francisco. In addition, I also believe it's important to read the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are on the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone, who are the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula. As the indigenous stewards of this land, and in accordance with their tradition, the Ramaytush Ohlone have never ceded, lost, nor forgotten their responsibilities as the caretakers of this place, as well as for all peoples who reside in their traditional territory. As guests, we recognize that we benefit from the living and working on their traditional homeland. We wish to pay our respects by acknowledging the ancestors, elders, and relatives of the Ramaytush community, and by affirming their sovereign rights as First Peoples. I also wanted to share my mission. My personal mission is to empower people and communities to manage their true potential and experience extraordinary success. I take that to heart in everything that I do. Personally, again, with Supervisor Walton and others, I served on the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission Citizens Advisory Committee as a representative of the Bayview, and then went on to chair that committee, where we really talked about all issues having to deal with water, power, and sewer, and its relations not only to our neighborhood, but neighborhoods across the city and county, but also with a focus on equity and what it actually means to spend in our neighborhoods and to support our local businesses. So I think it's really important. In addition, I had the opportunity to serve on the reparations committee recently, and being able to work with my community, right? Not only Bayview, but all of San Francisco on such an important matter has been really important. We sunsetted in January of this year, 2024. We did our work in providing the reparations committee final report, and we'll have some questions around where we are with that a little later today. I also want to share just why I do this. So number one, this has been a passion project for me since 2017. And specifically, I remember I have the freedom to sort of be in the rooms, right? Especially at public meetings, government meetings, or nonprofit meetings. And I remember in 2016, this is well before the pandemic, going to yet another government meeting that was happening during the day, right? I believe this one was at 11 o'clock. And people were angry that people from the community weren't there. I was mad, actually, right? Like, you expected people to take time out of their day. You expected them to take sick days or vacation days to come to your meeting. Like, this is important, but for the average family, they have other priorities to do. Now, let me be very clear. In talking to my neighbors, the community, people care about what's going on. They just can't do it at 11 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I remember talking to these people and being actually really upset and saying, so why didn't we do this like at 6 or 7 or 8? And I remember this person saying, oh, because I have to pick up my kids. I was like, wow, that's really interesting. You get to pick up your kids and you want to criticize us because we actually have to work during the day to feed ours, right? And so that's where this idea was born. I think over the past couple of years, with the pandemic, a lot of people have been going online, which is amazing and great. Unfortunately, I think the public access via online has been sort of shut off. So these types of forums, I think, are really still important today. So we really just wanted to get people the opportunity to ask questions of their representatives, but also other people in the community who are making a difference or who want to make a difference. And if you stick around, I'm actually going to ask what we actually want to do next as far as different speakers or topics sort of moving forward. Really, the whole mission is just to connect people in the neighborhood. Like I said, I started this because I was really upset with what some of the folks who are trying to do good work in government were saying about people in the community. But also, look, we know what's happening within a block. A block in 1 inch, not so much, right? And so the idea that we can sort of bring the right people together to have conversations is really important to me. We have our newsletter. We have a site under development. We've done marketing campaigns in the past. And because of all the times that we've actually had this and being part of reparations, et cetera, people from the Fillmore actually reached out to us. And last week, we actually did our first One Fillmore event with Supervisor Preston, where we asked them questions and sort of focused in on that community too. And I think there was like a lot of cross posting. So, because it's not, if what happens in one neighborhood actually affects other neighborhoods, right? And so we just wanted to give people the opportunity, if it's appropriate and if you so choose, to be able to have that level of conversation. But tonight we're going to focus in on the Bayview. I just want to go over community agreements. This is not a public meeting, right? This is sort of a community private meeting, so we can sort of have real talk. I just want people to be aware of the impact of their words. Practice self-care. If you need to go off camera, if you need to, do the things that you need to do, please feel free. Please keep yourselves on mute. Approach this work with a beginner's mindset, right? With a beginner's mindset, which means just be inquisitive, right? And please take the stance that people are trying to actually do good work, right? They're not trying to be evil on this call. I really believe that if you're on this call, people sort of want to know and share and be part of the solution sort of moving forward. So just please be mindful of the space that you occupy, right? We want to hear from people. If you have questions, please put them like in the chat. We have a number of questions to sort of go through, but as we sort of do that, I definitely want to sort of open it up to community sort of moving forward. With Representative Shammon Walton. Shammon has done great work for our community. He's been our district supervisor. I believe this is your second term?
It is.
Yeah. All too often, I've actually been with my folks, with my mom specifically in the South in Atlanta. And watching the news down there, everything news in general is negative, but everything there is really negative, right? Like, and every criminal is Black, which statistically just can't be the case. So as I'm talking about Bayview, I actually wanted to give you an opportunity to just share with us about what's going right in the Bayview from your perspective. What are the things that you sort of have done or sort of pushed forward that we need to know about?
Well, first of all, Anietie, I just want to say thank you for having this session and conversation with everyone tonight. I think I know it's been a while since we've all been together in this particular platform, so appreciate you and the folks at OneBayview for hosting tonight. It's good to see everybody. It's good to have conversation. I think there's a lot of things that we have to be excited about in the Bayview. If we look at the past almost 6 years that I've been in office, with the setting up of the cultural district would actually happen right before I got in office, but most certainly the resources and the funding going to support the work of the cultural district. That is something that we're excited about. Bringing the 15 express bus to Bayview, where folks can get to downtown much quicker. And we know how slow the T has been for our folks actually stopping switchbacks, unless it's been for maintenance issues and been for emergencies for the T line, to have to go back, finishing a lot of development projects that we have focused on, some of which are in areas people are not excited about 100%, but most certainly folks have been building on the shipyard, and it has been affordable housing that people are moving into and excited to have homes in that area. We continue to provide more oversight on the shipyard. We pushed from the civil grand jury report to have independent research done on groundwater and sea level rise on the shipyard. And so that research, independent research, is taking place. We required everyone who developed on parcel A all the new affordable housing projects to actually have soil sampling conducted before they were able to build. This was something that our office did. This was something that was not required, and we made sure that either the developers were going to do that or they were not going to be able to develop. And this is on parcel A, not on parcel G, where the Navy claims all the toxins are. So we've done a lot and everything we can and will continue to do, of course, to protect folks who are in the shipyard area and folks who are living on the shipyard. We've done a lot in the area of speed bumps. If you look down Paloux, if you go down Ingalls, if you go down Jennings, there are a lot more speed bumps. There's a sewage revamping happening on some of our streets, and the area of the neighborhood Hill, with Hollister and Ingerson and those areas, the sewage pipes are being reconstructed, and then we'll have more streets that are paved in community. There are a lot of things that we still need to do to be desired in terms of addressing our illegal dumping problem, but we do have legislation that now will provide cameras to catch some of the folks who are illegal dumping, so we can do everything we can to curtail that. We can definitely talk parking. And at the end of the day, like I tell folks, one thing that is not going to be solved, most certainly overnight, and probably not during my term, is eradicating violence completely. And we've done a lot of things to address that, as well as parking. We have families who can't afford to live in the city. We have families where there are 3 or 4 different families living in one household, everyone having to get to work, having to get to school, which has brought a lot of vehicles, which we don't have enough parking in community. And so obviously my goal is to continuously improve public transportation, to try to get folks out of cars so we can have less cars on the street, and continue to do things to address parking in that manner. We have made some changes in certain areas where, for instance, there were bike lanes put in place ahead of development. We've been able to dial some of that back until development is actually complete. So we continue to work on addressing that as well. But parking is an issue that we'll do everything we can to address, but most certainly won't be solved overnight. With that said, Anietie, I think I will pause there just so that I don't take up all of the time before we have questions. But I do want to say that we are in the middle of budget season right now. I know people have questions. We're facing a $1.2 billion deficit over the next couple of years. Just want everyone to know our priorities for the District 10 office are maintaining critical services, addressing affordability, decreasing the inequities that exist, of course, addressing safety, and making sure we address services for folks who are living on the street and folks with mental health concerns. And we'll continue to push that. And I did see someone talk about the trash on the corners. I did talk about the legal dumping legislation, cameras that are going to be in place, the fact that DPW now can cite people for dumping. But of course, this is the official response. You need to call 311. to report anything that you see. And you can also email my office at waltonstaff@sfgov.org, and we'll get folks out at the very least to address dumping and trash that is present. But most certainly, we're still working on doing what we can to stop the dumping illegally in our community. And I will stop there. Thank you for this time, Anietie, and just looking forward to having a discussion and answering questions.
No, that's perfect. Thanks so much for that. I wanted to go into a few questions that we've actually gotten from communities. So specifically from some of the Bayview Hill residents. They want to sort of hear more about Candlestick Park access. Yes, there's a lot of illegal dumping, but there's also sort of recreational. What can we do about some things that are sort of going on out there, right? Like the campers, et cetera. Can you talk more about what you and your office have done in the past and presently to help sort of address some of those issues?
So we are currently meeting weekly with the folks on Bayview Hill and having conversations, one, about the vehicle triage center and just doing anything we can to mitigate any issues or concerns that come up in regards to and directly related to the vehicle triage center. We also have consistent conversations with them, as well as other city departments, Office of Community Investment Infrastructure, Department of Public Works, Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing, MTA and traffic enforcement, just to address traffic issues, parking, things where folks may be living in vehicles. All those conversations are had with folks on the Hill, and we are in consistent contact with them. We just had well, let me not say we, 5 Points just had a community meeting to talk about the design at Candlestick to get feedback and input from community with the hopes of being able to break ground at some point next year, which is actually great news because a lot of development had got held up because it's the same development agreement as a shipyard. And unfortunately, when Tetra Tech falsified testing samples, it also affected Candlestick negatively. But we're in a space now where it looks like we're moving forward. But in terms of folks directly on Bayview Hill, we meet on a consistent basis with my office and also city departments to address their concerns.
That's great. Here in the chat, so someone talked about the traffic situation on 3rd Street. Why can't the lights be set correctly? People either speed to get through the lights or just run to the red lights in intersections. Of course, along with the bicycles, it's been a mess for quite a long time.
3rd Street obviously is one of those streets where we have so many modes of transportation operating on one street, which I don't think was ever set up to be the purpose. We have provided alternative bike routes for folks who want to ride safely to get through Bayview and to get to other areas of the city, and we'll continue to work on that. We put protected bike lanes on Evans. We put protected bike lanes in a cargo area. We put protected bike lanes on other parts of the district. We have the trains going down 3rd, as you know, as well as people who are driving. And one of the things we try to do is provide some priority for the T-line to make sure that it can be more efficient. And at the same time, we got to allow for pedestrians to be able to cross while folks are driving down 3rd and while the T-line is moving down 3rd. So there are a lot of different modes of transportation that have been tried to be addressed. You will see some improvements with lights to try to speed up the T. And so Muni is working on some of those issues and concerns. But these are things that you have to find the right mix of what's going to work for all modes of transportation, particularly in the street down 3rd, and particularly because so many different modes of transportation are allowed. The traffic part, though, this is the first time I've really heard about it being a traffic issue going down 3rd Street. And so I would definitely follow up with MTA to see what other solutions exist. But this is the first time anyone's ever said to me there's a traffic problem down 3rd Street, particularly in D10.
Someone just said, Alicia Jones Gardner, there was a severe lack of disabled parking on Third Street.
Well, we definitely can work to address that. If you send an email to my office, we can get a assessment done and see what we can do to get more disabled parking on the street.
And that's Walton staff.
Walton staff at sfgov.org, and I'll put that in the chat.
I just did it for you.
Thank you.
No worries. I wanted to shift gears a little bit. Actually, one, just touch base on this whole sort of, there's a Bayview shuttle through SFMTA that a number of us have been working on. I think we're stuck because they are trying to finalize a contract with a vendor, but the Bayview shuttle is meant to be free and or low cost. People with Muni can sort of use it, et cetera. There's also a transportation center in the Bayview. It's meant to be used within the Bayview so people can sort of get from point A to point B, either by using an app. You can call and sort of say where your pickup is. And I think the issue there is it's stuck in contract negotiations. So that might be another thing that can sort of help with some of the traffic situation in District 10.
Well, definitely. I mean, the goal of the shuttle obviously is to try to provide more access to folks who need transportation that have been more isolated. And we have community working, to your point, with MTA to figure out what the best route is, the best way to unleash the shuttle into community. And so I'm excited about the opportunity that it could be. I mean, there is no other area in San Francisco that has a pilot shuttle like we do, with the opportunity to provide more access to transportation for community. So this is something that community is really taking a lead on, and we're going to have to obviously come up with something that works best for the masses. But this opportunity is something that we should all be excited about because it doesn't exist anywhere else. And I'm looking forward to seeing what this pilot program will do to address accessibility and transportation, efficiency and transportation, and really provide more options for folks who seem to be left out when it comes to transportation. So more to come on that. As you know, we're a little ways away before the shuttles will actually be up and running in the community, but this will be another opportunity to address some of our transportation inequities in the district and in Bayview in particular.
Perfect. And wanted to switch gears just a little bit away from transportation and actually talk more about sort of housing and rentals. And I know that there are a number of housing sort of developments going on in the Bayview, but also just throughout District 10. Can you talk more about sort of affordable housing? Because I know, being on reparations, one of the big pushes that we had was simply, you can't talk affordable without talking how much someone can make to actually be affordable, right? A lot of times people sort of put out this word, and we've seen this locally as well as throughout the nation. And they're not talking about the homeless families. They're not talking about the working class, right? Like, and so for San Francisco, can you help us sort of understand what affordable actually is? And then, we can sort of get into, some of the great projects that are going on. You mentioned Candlestick, there's Sunnydale. I mean, there's a lot of great things going on that I think people should know.
Well, affordable, one, is obviously always going to be very relative and real personal to families and the folks affected. I mean, we tend to look at ensuring that nobody has to pay more than 1/3 of their income on their rent. And that is, typically what has defined whether or not someone would be housing insecure per se. At the end of the day, what I've always focused on in the district is the maximum amount of affordability on every project. Most of the affordable housing projects we have in District 10, since I've been supervisor, with the exception of a couple, have been low AMI of 40% and up. Most are considered 80% and up to be affordable projects. But the projects that we have that were proposed, for instance, for Candlestick, were 40% AMI and above. the ones that we propose for the shipyard, 40% and above, which really addresses the threshold for folks who are really very low income in existence. Even the power station, which is not in Bayview, but certainly off of 3rd Street. We have the first affordable housing building going up. It's named after Supervisor Sophie Maxwell, and that's 80% AMI. So the majority of affordable housing being built in San Francisco right now is in District 10. The majority of it is the bottom ANI of 40. Obviously, we want to continue to get more affordable housing projects in the district. To your point, we are revitalizing 4 of our major housing projects: Potrero Hill, Sunnydale, Alice Griffith, and Huntersview. And those are projects that are really happening, and folks are moving over adjacent and able to stay on site. And so that's something that has been beneficial to the residents in those communities. But even with those, continues to be things that we need to do to ensure that there are no displacements, that folks are mistreated while the development is going on. When Candlestick is fleshed out, we're going to see more affordable housing. The power station is looking to put another affordable housing building on. There are 2 all affordable housing buildings going up right now on the shipyard. So we're doing more than our share in San Francisco, addressing affordability, addressing affordable housing, and actually building housing. But I have a challenge all the time trying to get sometimes some of my colleagues to do the same in different communities in the city. And I just have to keep working and doing what I can over these next 2.5+ years to make sure the projects we have on the way are completed, and most certainly at least groundbreaking.
What can community do to help that process? Because I know that it can be really complex. I think there's a lot of things that you literally need to do by sort of going door, you yourself, by going sort of door to door within housing and sort of other parts of government. But what can we do to sort of help this process, especially to safeguard or to help the people in the community who could most benefit from affordable housing?
Well, I think the main thing, one, is to hold us accountable when we say we're going to build in a certain area, to make sure that it happens. Attend planning meetings, attend board of supervisors meetings, or at least send emails to my colleagues, to the planning commission, to all folks, mayor's office of housing, folks responsible for development, to make sure that no project ever leaves their mind, so that it has to be done. Look, you talked about Candlestick earlier, and this is probably the only area since I've been in office where there were a lot of promises made, where things were going to be developed and look a certain way, and we haven't even broken ground yet. And there are several reasons why that has happened, but most certainly stand involved in pushing me and my colleagues to address the things that have been promised is key and important. And the ways to do that are coming to meetings, sending emails, showing up, and putting the pressure on. Because as I fight for all of you when I'm in those rooms, most certainly when people see you show up as well, that is beneficial for all of us, because they know and understand that I'm not just carrying a message for Shammon Walton, but I'm carrying a message for the folks in Bayview and for the folks right here in District 10.
Right. Alyssa Jones Gardner, you have a quick comment or question?
Yes, a question and a comment. Why still using gross income to determine affordability instead of take-home pay? Because on paper, it may look like someone's making a lot of money, but in actuality, after taxes, after deductions, they may be making well below the poverty line, but that's not being reflected or counted. And that's also leading to a lot of working class people that are being made homeless in our city. Also, to Shammon's point about the other districts not kind of pulling their weight when establishing affordable housing, it's also political, like we saw in the last redistricting. If only one district is creating all of the affordable housing, that means your district is probably going to be the one on the chopping block during the next round of redistricting, because you're going to have too many people in your district. So when it comes to changing the landscape, the political landscape, the voting landscape of a district, it's going to be us that continually gets attacked and gets put on the chopping block, so to speak. And it's going to impact many of our residents of color who are going to be cut and moved and shifted into districts where they are a statistical minority, where they wouldn't otherwise be if they were counted in District 10. And there is a way that we can put more pressure if we know people in other districts, having them advocate also to have affordable housing in their districts as well. Because again, if it's only being placed in the Bayview, that means we're always going to be cut when redistricting comes around, because we're always going to have way more people that we're servicing than any other district.
But definitely one in terms of gross receipts being determining income. That is something that obviously starts with the federal government, and that's something that they consider how that's their measuring stick for what someone's income is. Most certainly, we've done things here in San Francisco, like provide rental assistance programs and subsidies. We are working on universal basic income strategies for certain populations here in the city, and those are things that are going to help provide some relief when it comes to rent. But you're right, gross receipts should not be the way it's determined, because actual income, what you actually receive, really determines how you're able to budget and survive. And my goal and role is to do everything we can to subsidize and provide resources and opportunities for folks so that we can alleviate some of that burden, because that is how income is determined. And that's why I fight for the lowest threshold when we talk about affordable housing. I would say in terms of redistricting, I mean, obviously, folks did everything they could in their power to change the dynamic of District 10, even through the last redistricting process. A lot of people's goal is to try to separate the Black communities that still exist and sparse them so that they're not interconnected anymore. And that goes for obviously other people of color as well, but most certainly the Black community. You separate Potrero Hill, Viz Valley, and Bayview from each other, and you're most certainly doing a number on the Black community and communities of color. There are focuses on changing the redistricting process, trying to make it so they're not necessarily appointed by the board in the mayor's office. Still many conversations about what that looks like and how to do that. But there are efforts out there to try to avoid a lot of what happened last time, which was very volatile, because to your point, population growth most certainly is putting District 10 in a position where we're going to see changes in the future when it comes to redistricting, and that has to be addressed equitably in the right way. So more efforts on that. Nothing finalized in terms of what the actual new focus will be around redistricting, but that is something that everyone is concerned about and folks are doing the work on right now. Anietie, you're on mute, I think.
Thank you for that. And I wanted to sort of shift us, because we have a limited amount of time today. And I wanted to sort of shift us over to really sort of talking about food access and food security. What things are being done in the district to address these things? How are ordinance requiring grocery stores to give 6 months notice before impacting community? Like, is that sort of in place? What things can we sort of look for? What things are you fighting for to sort of address food security, especially since the funding for food security post-COVID seems to have sort of gone away?
Well, I mean, we have some things we can be excited about as a district. We have 2 new grocery stores. We have a new grocery outlet on Bayshore. We have a Lucky store in Bayview Plaza. We actually made Food Co. make a lot of changes, providing fresh produce now, providing fresh meat in their butcher shop. I mean, they've stepped up in a lot of ways because we pushed them to do that. They actually have to-go meals on site now where you can get fresh salads and different things that didn't exist a couple of years ago on food cost. So pushing improvements. There are other things that we've done. There is going to be, and we're actually going to be kicking off the grand opening at the senior center, because not the senior center, but operated by the senior center, on 3rd Street, on right next to where the Bank of America used to be. There will be a fresh produce, a fresh hub where folks can go get food called the Bayview Market. So that's a new place for folks who are identified and who have most certainly been suffering from food insecurity. We are doing everything we can to save a lot of the resources, to your point that you're talking about, during this budget process. We get the mayor's budget on Friday, and we'll really know what cuts look like and where we stand around cuts, but most certainly focusing on continuing to fund our food pantries, continuing to support the food bank and other programs that have been feeding communities is going to be part of what my focus is during this budget process as well. Yes, you've seen attempt by Supervisor Preston to put legislation together to say you have to give a certain amount of time to close grocery stores, and we'll have more conversation about that to try to make that a reality. Fortunately, at this time, I'm not aware of any stores closing. I'm only aware of grocery stores being on the way and coming into community. Some of you may know that we will have a market that will occupy where Fresh and Easy used to be, where Duckloy used to be. So that should be up and running pretty soon. And we have another avenue and opportunity to buy groceries and fresh produce right in community. So looking forward to that. We'll be having conversations with those owners very soon to make sure that that happens and continues.
That's great. What other public health programs are sort of being put in place? I think that you mentioned universal basic income, and for some that doesn't sound like a public health issue, but to me it actually does, because a huge part of public health has to do with stress. And I remember hearing you and others sort of talk about this, and how it sort of help relieve stress of people and sort of like improved health outcomes, but also financial outcomes.
Anietie, I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I think delivery man at my door.
No worries at all. What I was saying was, can you talk about some of the other public health programs? And I just interjected that, universal basic income for some might be considered a public health program because you're actually reducing stress. Like this was I think a pilot was done in relation to pregnant women in the city and county of San Francisco with amazing results for pre and postnatal sort of care and delivery. So I just was wondering if you have any insight on other public health sort of programs in addition to the great work that's sort of being done around the food pantries.
Well, I mean, not in relation to public health and food insecurity per se. I mean, we've done a lot in terms of public health to address issues of folks with mental health concerns and provide alternative responses in community versus trying to lock people up, but really provide them with opportunities to be able to get help and support. Positive Resource Center has actually been working very well, and we have abstinence programs in place now, along with harm reduction programs, because we want to tackle the issues that exist on our streets around substance abuse and folks with mental health concerns. We have to do an approach that is going to work and address everyone's needs and concerns. We do have a brand new health center in the Southeast. A lot of you may have seen that, and most certainly all of our centers are operational, providing quality preventive care work. In some cases, outpatient surgery are happening right at our very own clinics here in community. But access to mental health support is something that we really are trying to increase, particularly for communities of color, to make sure that we have more clinicians, to make sure that we have more folks who can address concerns, because people with trauma and people with stress are having, are needing services more and more, particularly coming out of COVID, particularly in this time period where the wealth gap has increased tremendously in San Francisco. And we remain a place that is most certainly addressing a lot of health needs in the city. but we need to do a lot more in areas of mental health and providing support for folks who need that level of support.
That's great. Thank you. One other thing, and this is sort of goes back to our question about sort of accountability earlier. How do we actually hold like people who deliver this food, whether it's the food bank or others, accountable, right? Like if it's a Lucky's, then if they had bad food, we can go to Google, we can tell our friends not to shop there. But places like the food bank, you know, free markets, et cetera, how can we ensure the quality of that food? You know, do we call your office? Do we call 311? Is there any kind of sort of feedback loop that you sort of seen that people could exercise?
Well, anytime you have concerns with folks doing work in the community, most certainly feel free to reach out to my office. I know that the food bank and the nonprofits that they work with do have surveys about the services that they provide, surveys about the quality of food, surveys about what people like and would like to see. I know that sometimes they're able to make shifts and changes to be more culturally appropriate, to provide better quality food in some cases. But in some cases, when you are an operation like the food bank and you work off of donations and you work off of receiving goods and products from other people that want to support and help, they don't always have the level of choice that you want. And that's why I am excited about the market that's going to be on 3rd Street, because it's set up to provide more choice options, more choice opportunities in the area of produce, in the area of meat, in the area of your starches, to give people an opportunity to have more choice. But definitely you can reach out to our office. The food bank is providing their own surveys and most certainly taking feedback if you reach out to their contact list as well. And, you know, they have tried to make some changes. I've actually seen it take place. But at the same time, it is a reality when you receive donations. It's harder to provide all of the choices and options that one may receive from a typical grocery store per se.
I wanted to switch really quickly and sort of talk about education. Specifically, what is the district doing to support our schools in District 10 in the Bayview? And if you could talk a little bit about the potential school closures sort of moving forward.
Well, from a big picture standpoint, you know, we passed Prop G, and that is going to be providing up to $1 million for schools with the biggest gaps in achievement that need the most support. There's an RFP process that just took place, and all of our Bayview elementary schools receive some level of resources depending on what they applied for. So that's the good news, because hundreds of thousands of dollars are going into our elementary schools for sure, to help address some of the things that have really been increasing the achievement gap. But obviously we still have a long way to go. The city does provide resources through the Public Education and Enrichment Fund, third for sports, libraries, arts and math, the third the district can use in any way it wants, and the third for early childhood education. So those things are still happening. That support is still happening. Obviously, the property tax set aside through the Department of Children, Youth and Families provides a lot of services that support young people in our schools, particularly a lot of your out of school programs. So the city has made major investments. At the same time, it's not enough. And to your point, there's a conversation right now about school closures. I haven't been excited about the process. I think it is not transparent. And in fact, simultaneously, while the district is talking about closing schools and merging schools, and most certainly schools in Bayview, and not just Bayview, but other areas of District 10 have been targets for years for closure. They also want to reach out to me to talk about supporting facilities bond. And I can't in good conscience see how I would support a facilities bond when they're talking about closing schools in my district. They said they made a promise that none of the monies from the bond will go towards schools that are on the closure list, which tells me you already got an idea which schools you want to close. So they're not being transparent in how they're operating. It's harder for us as members of the Board of Supervisors to really do much to control the process or to change the process. But most certainly, I've attended the sessions. I am involved in learning as much as I can, and we'll be prepared to work with community on a response once we find out what the district is really trying to do. But the transparency most certainly has been lacking.
No, I appreciate that. And I know you sort of came up through the school board, so you sort of at least then had the inside scoop, I think, on a lot of like the inner workings. So thank you for sort of leveraging that expertise, being able to read between the lines for us, because those of us who don't know, right, this is not our everyday job. We need that like level of insight.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why, I can't imagine any process you go into it without some ideas and at least conceptually of what you want to do. And I would rather the district be transparent with community about that versus saying they are going in with an open mind and they don't have a clue as to what direction they want to go in. Because this is very real to families and this is very real to communities. Yes, enrollment is down. Yes, the numbers are down for so many different reasons. COVID being a major part of that, but at the same time, being transparent so that we can do things in a manner that are equitable and efficient for everybody is going to get us a better result, even when people are not going to be happy and people are going to be upset. But most certainly, being upfront and building trust is the way to go forward.
I know in other parts of the country, we've seen this trend, school closures, developers coming in, buying the land, converting it, and adding to gentrification. Do you see that as a potential threat here in the Bayview or in District 10?
Well, the Bayview is under threat of gentrification for a lot of reasons already. We have the most affordable property in San Francisco, if you can even use that word affordable in San Francisco in the same sentence. But it is more affordable in our community than other places. We are doing the most building of housing and affordable housing, so people are naturally moving in to Southeast sector communities because we have places available for them to move into. We've already lost a lot of our population due to a school system, due to lack of options for jobs, due to the fact that we've just had an increasing high cost of living that is driving all folks out, and most certainly folks who have existed in our community where we had the highest home ownership for a very long time. So definitely concerned about gentrification continuing to happen, to be accelerated. I mean, we've done everything we can from a legislative standpoint, from right to return work to making sure that we do have the most affordable housing so that we do provide opportunities for people to come back to the city and people to stay in the city, working aggressively to get our certificate of preference holders who were pushed out to have first dibs on new housing that is coming to the city. Strategies like that are gonna be major as we move forward. Our home assistance programs that are in place, some of the recommendations like homeowner assistance, like making sure that we carve out space and opportunity for populations to have first dibs and opportunity at new housing. Those types of policies are going to have to become reality. Fighting Prop 209 is going to be a continued fight, but there are things I am working on as a mechanism to fund some of the reparations recommendations. And when we finalize some of those strategies, most certainly we'll be informing community about what that step is and what that plan is, so that we can realize some of the recommendations that will come from the hard work of the task force.
Is there any way that you can share it so that we could support you?
Well, definitely just working with the city attorney on trying to find legit ways to funnel resources into a reparations pot of money. So there's no finality to that, but most certainly as soon as there's something that is tangible, I'll be ready and excited to share it with everybody.
And just so you know, because of course, being on the task force, heading economic empowerment, just saw today that of course the right-wing conservatives they're coming for us. So they're in the process of suing Evanston, right? One of the first reparations programs to sort of be successful and calling it unconstitutional, right? And so that's something that I think we need to really rally against, sort of moving forward. But I just wanted to bring that up because I think it's really important. We had a
Yeah.
couple. Yep.
So go ahead. No, I was just going to say, most certainly we are going to be sued for the work that we're doing. But we're doing everything we can to, be as tight as possible when that litigation comes. But there are people who are going to do everything in their power to that this doesn't happen.
Do you have a question in the chat and wanted to know if you knew the answer? Has Lucky's renewed their lease because it was supposed to end this year?
I will follow up on that because I didn't think the lease was ending this year, but I will follow up on that.
Right. I did want to sort of shift us to public safety. What measures are being taken to address sort of public safety in the Bayview? Are we free to explore non-police options? Has that sort of been put forward? Would love to sort of get your thoughts, feedback, direction on public safety in the Bayview.
Well, some of you may know we have an extensive District 10 safety plan that really focuses on stopping and mediating any violence. Here in the district, it was developed with the Public Defender's Office, the Police Department, the District Attorney's Office, our Street Violence Intervention and Prevention Program, several nonprofits. And the focus is really making sure that there are jobs available for folks in the community, that there are people responding anytime any incidents of violence may occur in one neighborhood so that there's no retaliations that happen. There are interventions that are happening daily in our schools to make sure young people have things to do, that they are supported, that they have counselors and people and case managers that are connected to them to keep them safe, keep them positive, and keep them from trying to do anything that may harm themselves or community. Most certainly, I just met with the new captain, Conieris, yesterday, just to get him up to speed and some of the things that we're doing, making sure that obviously all of our communities are safe. Anytime we have areas that may be considered hotspots, making sure there's a response there, making sure that PD is engaging with community. But most certainly, the major focus for everything we do around public safety has to be a combination of things that don't involve the police department. Police cannot handle all of the concerns of community. There's a responsibility that we all have as neighbors and members of this community. And one of the things that we've been able to do, of course, is to have our meetings in community forums like this. There's places that people can go to engage with police department. I know the Bayview station meets monthly and the captain talks about what's going on, because community policing is something that actually is something that I see as positive, but it has to happen in a way, in a manner where we have officers on foot beats, we have officers on bikes and engaging with community, speaking with community, because that tends to, of course, develop trust. And of course, the visibility keeps incidences down. I am happy to report that we have had a less violent year so far than we've had since I've been in office, particularly around shootings and homicides. And the goal is to make sure that trend continues. And a lot of that is when incidents are occurring or when people see things that may result in concerns or issues that lead to possible violence. We do have responses from PD, responses from my office, responses from our street violence intervention and prevention team that come out and alleviate issues before they happen. And a lot of people are not necessarily aware of how much SBIP does to prevent violence and certain issues. We do have larger strategies of alternative police responses throughout the city, like our crisis alternative response team, which mainly address issues of folks who may be unhoused and have mental health issues and concerns, but may cause nuisances. Most certainly Urban Alchemy and the work that they're doing in the Tenderloin to help people navigate through the Tenderloin and to keep areas clean and protect people from any type of violence or other things that may exist. They have worked very well to do that in other areas across the city. And so if we see a trend where it's necessary in Bayview, that's most certainly something we can have more conversations about. I did increase resources for MTAP officers, which are security guards on the MTA, as well as for community ambassadors along the 3rd Street corridor and in Biz Valley, so that folks have people they can go to when they have questions, concern, or when they just need to navigate their community space.
That's great. Thank you very much. I think one of the other things that sort of comes to mind, there's been a stat that the biggest mental health care organization in California is our prisons. And so, and I think you touched on this a little bit earlier, one Southeast, I think there's Arthur B. Coleman, and there are other institutions that can sort of help with sort of mental health issues. But if I, for example, was in my condo and we had homeless people actually trying to sleep in our garages, right? And we actually had an intentional conversation amongst the owners and said, look, we actually don't want to call the police because we actually don't trust them, right? We don't want to be part of the problem. Who do we call, right? Is there, is it 311 really? Is there another number that we can actually get to, right? Like you talk about the other crisis hotlines, et cetera. Who can we talk to get people help and actually get our sort of issues sort of resolved?
So this is the one thing I don't like, because the crisis alternative response team is a great team. They have a counselor, they have medical professionals, they have someone who's able to deal with someone from nonprofit world that works and connects our unhoused community to services. It's a team that comes out. You still have to call 911 for them. That is because there is no other system to separate that call. So CART will be dispatched out when you explain what the concern is and what the issue is. Ask for CART specifically. It's still dispatched through 911 because that's a system that we have in place. We've been working to get an alternative number and an alternative system, but that just takes, it's an expense and also a training thing that has to happen for us to have that separate number. So you would still call 911, request CART to come out versus the police.
Thank you. We need that. Thanks so much. We did have a question around cannabis businesses in the Bayview. It sounds like there are 35 proposed cannabis businesses going into the Bayview. What are your thoughts about that large number of them sort of coming here versus to other districts?
Well, there was a point in time where I had concerns about cannabis businesses. But there are several different things and factors that we look at. One, over 70% of San Francisco approved recreational use of cannabis. Secondly, they've been providing pathways and opportunities for folks who have been formerly incarcerated, folks who wouldn't typically have opportunity to own a business as a pathway into business ownership. They're heavily regulated. Their security at each and every last one of them, they've actually provided additional eyes and additional security in areas and communities that we've never seen before, that actually has turned into be a positive and beneficial for some of these areas. What I will say is, in terms of whether they are approved or denied, that is something that the Office of Cannabis does, and they go on strict criteria. But just because applications are in doesn't mean they get approved.
Thank you for that. Our hour is come to an end.
Oh, yeah.
I wanted to give you an opportunity, sort of last words, sort of share any sort of last thoughts.
Well, one, I did see a couple of things in here. I know all my Usos had the opening. There was a question about how to book me. I actually did confirm for that event. I mean, you can go to waltonstaff@sfgov.org. Most of your organization's leadership have my contact, which is in the same case as all my Usos, but there was just a conflict that had nothing to do with organization not able to get a hold of me. In fact, I did commit to attending, but there was something up that prevented me from being able to do that. Most certainly, just want everyone to understand that my office is here to be responsive. If you reach out to Walton staff at sfgov.org, you will get a response. You can also call 415-554-7670 and either leave a message or someone will be able to answer the phone to address your concerns. There are a lot of things that we still have to do and accomplish here in the district, and particularly in Bayview. A lot of concerns that I know are expressed here, and we are working around the clock to address the concerns, to address concerns around folks who are unhoused and living in vehicles, to address parking issues and safety issues that I know are at the top of some of your minds, and of course the quality of life issues around illegal dumping. So just know that we are hard at work here in the District 10 office. Most certainly we'll come back and have these conversations again. As far as hearing about services that may be cut or things for resources not going in the community like we've seen in the past, these are very real and hard conversations that we're having right now. But my main goal, of course, is to maintain all the level of services and level of resources that we currently have going out in community. And obviously, as you expressed your concerns, we are having budget meetings on Wednesdays moving forward. And anyone who wants to come out, send emails to my colleagues in my office just to let people know how you feel. That is encouraged because it is important for everyone to hear from you. But I will continue to remain accessible. And if your question didn't get answered today, please feel free to email waltonstaff@sfgov.org. And of course, we'll get you a response to your questions or get someone to follow up with any concerns you may have.
And one thing that I would love to know, I know that there, as you said before, the budget meetings are happening now. Is anyone from your staff sort of writing up a document that'll sort of outline, hey, we need help on X, Y, and Z, right?
Oh, yeah.
If you could share that, I am
Put
committed
that
to
in. I'm putting an email right now.
Perfect. I'm committed to getting that back out to community. And if you are on this call and you want to sort of organize around that, let me know, because I think this is really important. This is where we can sort of play our role, giving him the air cover that he needs internally inside the corridors of the city, and us doing our job on the outside, really sort of pushing for the things that we want. And until we know, right, what that delta is, what they're closing, what they're not going to do, we're kind of lost, right? And so by working with your staff, understanding that, we can sort of push this forward, because I think there are a lot of concerns, some of which we haven't gotten to, but most of them that we have, that I really sort of want to sort of push forward. And again, I just want to thank you for being part of this today. Folks love it. See in the comments, in the chat, the emails that I've gotten. This is really helpful. So with that, I want to say thank you, Supervisor Walton, for being part of our discussion today.
No, thank you everyone for being here this evening. Obviously, we have more conversations and more follow-up, but appreciate you, and we'll see you all soon. Thanks, Anietie.
Absolutely. Thank you. And for those of you still on, one of the things that I do want to do sort of moving forward, and I'll send this out, is I do want to sort of have our own sort of family meeting, sort of go over the issues. So I think that we need a place where we can not only state these, but track them moving forward. Would love to sort of hear people's thoughts on that, right? Because I think this is not the only forum that sort of is out there. Alyssa, please. Yes.
No, I definitely agree. We need to have more meetings like this, especially like within like this group of people. There's still a lot of work to be done in the Bayview, and it's degrading in some areas and then being uplifted in others, and it's creating this very clear delineation between the classes and the races. And
Don't know what just happened. Please come back to us.
in a group of people. Oh, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yeah.
There's this switch that. There we go. That should be better. There's this clear demarcation between the classes and the races that's being formed in the Bayview, and not all of it is just the result of redistricting, but just a lot of the construction that's happening and the shift in population, and it's uplifting one group while simultaneously shoving out another. And we should all be rising together. And we need a space to hash out some of these things, to figure out solutions. I tried to throw a few in there, especially when it comes to our schools, because I worked in our schools and I've seen firsthand what's happening. And it begins and ends with reading. If your child can't read, or they can't read at grade level, they will not be successful in any other area of school. That's just the long and short of it. And we have kids who are being pushed into the 4th and 5th grade who either can't read at all or are reading at a kindergarten level. How are we expecting them to succeed if we're not giving them the tools to do so? And there are free programs like Reading Partners. It's through AmeriCorps that are in some of the schools. They've had some difficulties trying to establish a partnership with schools in the Bayview, but the need is there. And they would be able to provide that one-on-one attention that a lot of our students need, especially within the Black community. We do not statistically do well in these larger classrooms where we're not getting that individualized attention, when we're able to just basically just skate by, or, worse, actively be ignored in favor of the majority of students. And we can't keep graduating kids that can't read. It's like some of the worst records of that, because if they can't read in elementary school, they're not going to learn it in middle school, and they're not going to learn it in high school. And we're going to graduate adults that can't read, who can't function in this society.
I appreciate that. Are there any other issues from anyone else? It should be highlighted. It doesn't have to be around sort of education, but just wanted to, before we sign off, give people the opportunity. All right. One of the things that I'm definitely going to put out there, so please watch your email. I'm going to give it to communities, help us sort of determine what we want the next one of these to sort of look like. So we had one with the supervisor. I'm just going to put this out there. Maybe we choose an area like education, right? And bring together some of the major players here in the Bayview, some of the principals, et cetera, to have this level of conversation. Alyssa, that you sort of talked about. Maybe we do a separate one around safety and public safety, and we have that conversation, not only around the non-police, the police options, and some of the other options that might be available to us that we just don't know about. I think there's a lot going on here and in other places given. But we don't always know the mechanisms or the processes that are sort of going along with them, right? And so when people come and say, oh, this is in place, it's like, how the hell am I supposed to know that, right? I've done a lot around sort of food security, et cetera. And I remember having this person come in and go, oh, call 311. It was like, nah, pick up your phone, call 311. You do it right now. How can you tell someone to do something that you haven't done yourself, right? And by the way, I actually did call 311, and it was horrible in getting the services that people needed, right? Like horrible. So using that as a scapegoat for people in community that have always been hurt or harmed is not a solution, right? And I think it gets into this whole idea of, oh, it was always right there. All you had to do was call. No, I called. It doesn't work. I told you about it. You didn't fix it. Like that's a different level of conversation that I think we need to have across the board. Heck, it is street cleaning of all things. Like I'm actually tired of getting, I used to get tickets for street cleaning and the streets were never cleaned. I would watch them come down. There would be no water coming out of these vehicles. What is that about? Like, this is a basic level of service, right? Like, what's going on? We talk about parking, and yes, double parking on Third Street can be a pain in the butt. Let's just be honest. Like, the lanes are this big, right? And I thought it was just us, and until I went over to Noe Valley and saw it there too. I was like, oh, this is interesting. That totally needs to be addressed. I don't exactly know how. But also when we're taking a look at affordable housing, I think this has happened in the newer developments over at Alice Griffith and some of the others. When they put them in place, they don't put enough parking in, right? They have some equation that they want to sort of quote and say, oh, we can't put it in, which is a bunch of BS. You can put in parking. People should just take public transit. If you've ever, again, tried to take public transit from Alex Griffith downtown, it is horrible, right? Like it is horrible. You can't tell people to go and take a service that is subpar as a replacement for something that works. You might not like it, but if I can get in my car and go from point A to point B in under 30 minutes, yet getting on a bus will take me 2 hours, what do you think people are going to do? Provide a better service, people will just take it. I mean, I don't think that that's a hard thing. And I know I've said this before, but in some of these meetings, there was this one, I swear to, I literally was freaking pissed. We were talking about Muni. The guy from Muni showed up late. We're like, did you take Muni here? No, I drove. What are you driving for? If I had to take Muni to get here in the middle of my day, right? How dare you not take Muni to get here? Oh, because you were going to be late. Isn't that the point? Isn't that what we're talking about? So those are just my thoughts. Alyssa, please.
Oh, that and I know exactly who you're referring to. That Muni that does that. He doesn't see the inherent hypocrisy in a lot of his actions. As far as the double parking issue, is something that I actually brought up to Shammon during his first term, actually. And that was increasing parking enforcement presence. Like if you can have 12 parking enforcement to make sure that nobody's parking on a certain street during street cleaning day, you can have them do a few loops around and start ticketing the double parking. It will stop. Because as soon as they get those tickets and they have to keep paying those tickets, and because there's so much construction going on now around 3rd Street, technically those fines are supposed to be doubled, it'll stop. Trust me, it will stop. But they don't want to use a punitive method to deter from the double parking. But it's creating a health and safety risk too, because they've blocked like ambulances and fire trucks because of the double parking. So like in a very real way, it's a traffic issue, but it's also health and safety, because every second that an ambulance is stuck behind someone's car because they ran out to go get a bag of chips from the corner store and just decided to take their time, someone could die. And people probably have, and we're not like factoring that in. Um, as far as like some of the issues like with the food bank and even like going back to the transportation, to your point, there are these mechanisms in place, but there are very few checks and balances. There's very little quality control. There's very little regulation. And that's where we're failing. The food pantry should never feel comfortable enough to say, oh, we dump that stuff in the Bayview because we know you guys will throw it away. So they can still meet their quota of how many bags and pounds of food they're giving out, whether or not it's edible. They're doing it specifically to the Bayview because they know our complaints will never be taken seriously. It's very deliberate. And it's just another example of systematic racism. We have these mechanisms. We have these mechanisms because we fought for them. And now we're being kept from being able to utilize them because of racism and racists who are in power there. Because this is an issue that goes back like 12 years at the food bank. It wasn't like this before. It's only recently become that way because of changes in their administration. And I know because I worked with my mom who ran a food pantry in the Bayview for 12 years. So I've seen it firsthand how that change impacted the quality of the food available, because there is plenty of food available. There are a lot of stores that contract directly with the food pantry, the food that deliver food there because they can write it off on their corporate taxes. So the food is there. What we're seeing is deliberately being like the quality, the poorest quality of food being given to the most impacted neighborhood in favor of other neighborhoods. Because you can go into Viz Valley, you can go into Pacific Heights. They all have food pantries, food banks, and you can see the difference. It's night and day between the quality that comes off of those trucks from the food bank.
Yeah, and another issue that we definitely need to address. And I also want to say thank you to Christine, and if I'm saying this wrong, Maya, Executive Director of Alma USOS. Mental health is really important. There's also Rafiki in the Bayview. I think there are several others that we need to get the message out about. I know the Southeast Center has been renovated. I'm actually not quite sure who can actually go there.
It's open to everyone. They do take all forms of health insurance, I believe.
Okay.
San Francisco Health Plan, Medi-Cal. They also have some things with them just as far as from a customer service standpoint. The building is new, the staff is not. And I'm just gonna say it that way, just to but there have been a lot of complaints about the way the staff treats their patients and people who come there to ask for information. And it's an unacceptable level of disrespect and just detestment for the residents that utilize that, their medical services. Again, complaints often fall on deaf ears when it comes out of the Bayview and when it comes out of, Black and brown mouths. It's just not taken as seriously.
Thank you for that. Years ago, I actually went to them and said, hey, because they weren't taking like Blue Cross or some of the other ones. I'm like, how is that possible? I should be able to walk across, right, MLK Field and go get my blood drawn right there. Like, why do I have to now go across the city someplace to do this exact same thing? And oh, by the way, if you provide a service to the people who live in your neighborhood as an asset to all neighbors, we will go to bat for that, right? Like, you actually have all these great things that you could do right here, right? And empower your own neighbors to to really sort of fight for you if you'd open it up. So if they're actually taking different health insurance now, kudos to them. But I know years ago they were not, and they were not open to it. Like simple things like, drawing blood, getting vaccines, like things like that. So that's good to hear. All right, I want to say thank you everyone for being part of this tonight. You'll be getting a survey, a bunch of other things. You'll help us determine what our next one will be. I'm looking forward to this. Also, really, I'm going to put this out there, this whole idea of how can we work together on these issues, right? And for me it's, hey, how can we actually get a lot of people? Like I'm thinking, you're retired, we need you, right? Because maybe you can go to a meeting when the rest of us can't, right? You have some skill, let's do it. Like, let's not have a few people try to boil the ocean, so to speak, because there are a lot of issues. Let's just face it, right? But is there a way for us to all get together, maybe take a little piece and use this and other methods to coordinate, right? To sort of try to move that needle forward. So with that, I just want to say thank you all. Have a good night.